tell you this is going to be a fun sermon. And it's going to be fun because you're all going to get to be part of it before it's done. So don't lose that nice piece of white paper you got, okay? And don't give it away, right? Okay. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Obviously, in this story, the father is who? God. Now, we got that defined. Let's work through the 2 sons for the next few minutes. So, the first thing I want to see is in the culture that we live in today, how many of us give to our young children our estate when they're not right? Well, okay, good. You're all good stewards. I've got so far exactly none of your eyes even moved on that one. And that's good. So the same thing back in the biblical time would have been through the way that the estate would have been given, but there's something different. Normally, like in America today, we would give our estate in life end like this. My father has 3 of us children. I'm going to assume, because his father did it this way, that the gift is given equally to each of us children. If he doesn't do that, that's okay too. But each of us children should be given to equally. In the Old Testament, and in the time of Jesus, it was done a little bit differently. The estate would have gone to the oldest son. In the text here today, we see, and those that Jesus was talking to, this is a different father. There's something different about this person, this giver. Because the father gave equally, and the young man said, "Hey, I want my part of my estate." Now, every time I've told my family, I want this, I've been humbled. I got a pretty direct no. So as this happened, as a father gives, I want you to remember that God gives equally to each of us. The Bible teaches us that God sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. God provides for all of us. It's what we do with that provision is up to us. That's a decision. In the text, so he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and squandered his wealth in wild living. I could preach for an hour on that. I could be so fundamental today that you all would scream. I'll only be a little fundamental in today's preaching. Check this out, wild living. Now, in the early service, with most people average age of like 70, this didn't work as good. And for those of you that I've just offended, forgive me. But how many of you seen VH1 or MTV, those documentaries they have? 1 person, the camera operator. 2, good, okay. Here's the way it works. I'm going to teach you. John, I'm going to teach you, all right? Here's the way it works on there. Big rock and roll lifestyle. We were doing really good. Everything was working out. And then we ran out of money. And then we had to go to rehab. And then we realized that it was all about ourselves and things fell apart. That's a good example of the prodigal son story. Because in this, he went off and he lived in wild living. Now, with a mixed audience today, I could name off 50 things. But I want you to think about wild living. I want you to think about the things that we've done, the things that we're currently doing, or the things that we might even just be thinking about doing that are wild living. Wild living is the opposite of living in right connection. Okay? After he spent everything, and there was a severe famine in that whole country, so he began to be in need. I go back to this thought of wild living. How many of us were alive and in the workforce in like 2003, 4, 5, 6, 6.5, even almost 7? Man, it was awesome. God existed, but not to a lot of us. Because we were relying on our own needs. We were relying on what we could do. There was a lot of money. And with a lot of money came a lot of bad things for a lot of us. 2008, I just say this, and it's not even part of the sermon thoughts, but 2008 we were all humbled, right? October. By 2009 we realized, a lot of us started to say we need God in a bigger way today than we did a year ago. Because we don't have wealth, we don't have stuff, we have debt, we have effects of things that we've done. This is sort of what the prodigal son was starting to experience, but obviously in his case, we would probably want to point the finger and say, yeah, it was more directly his fault that he was in this situation. He was in this situation because of things he done wrong, right? He took this money and went off. I know somebody that one time was in a car accident back in the 80s, and they got a big collection, you know, the big payout. And guess what happened? Went to Ocean City, took all their friends, went to Ocean City, and when that $10,000 or $15,000 was all sped up on wild living in Ocean City, when some of them ended up in jail, some of them ended up in rehab, and some of them ended up in a mental institution, when that happened, guess what? This person that I do know, those friends were there no more. Those friends disappeared. They did not help with restoration. They did not help with changing this person's life. So, after he spent everything he had, there was a severe famine, and the whole country began in need. Now, when you're really down on your luck and stuff is bad, and it's really ugly time, at that point, no one was helping him. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. This is in a Jewish culture. How many of you in the Jewish culture that are familiar with the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, or anyone who's practicing Jewish right now, how many times do they have a pig roast at the synagogue? How many times do they eat bacon with their eggs? How many times do they have pork chop meal? Let me give you, shoot it straight. Jewish law said, no, no, no. Anything with a hoofed foot is not good to eat. Jesus said, it's more your thoughts and your heart that's the problem than what you put in your mouth. I just stand before you and thank God for Judeo-Christianity, right? We see that, but we also have grace through Christ. Well, had it not been for Christ, we wouldn't have pork, crabs, and lobster, and shrimp. Anyway, it's a whole other sermon. And Kat, you come back another day, I'll give you that other sermon. So at this point, what I want us to look at is, in the culture, it was that bad. It was that bad that he was willing to hire himself out to feed and tend to pigs. As he was feeding and tending to pigs, it was so bad he wanted to eat pig food. So not only are the pigs that dirty, but he would be willing to eat what they eat. So eating pork is bad. This is like bad, 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 bad. Bad. If any of you have ever been to a pig farm, good. I got 5 of you. Good. Okay, so you're gonna you work with me on this. Pigs are rough. Pigs are down. This to let you know is our sanctuary pig pen. Pigs are down in there. They're wilding. They're doing their thing. But when you feed pigs, you dump that stuff over the rail a lot of times, or in a trough we made for fun. But you dump it over the rail, and it gets all over them, and they slop in it and all this. And pig get fed what? Slop. What is slop? For those of you that have never been to a pig farm, you're going to go there today. Pig slop is stuff that you wouldn't eat, stuff that's bad, stuff that's no good, stuff that stinks, mixed with some other stuff to make it stink even more. That's pig slop. And he wanted that. He hoped to be able to eat that. Right? He didn't have those potato chips and that bottle of water. He didn't have a good meal to eat. He really desired that. So he starts to say, I wish I could have this. Verse 17 says, when he came to his senses, he said, see, when he came to his senses, this isn't working out so good. Maybe I need something different. Maybe I should change my pattern. How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and I'm here starving to death? I'll set guy makes a plan, right? Recovery plan. I'll set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. He was like, you know what? I'm willing to do whatever. He was over on this side right here, and he said, I'm willing to go to that side. I'm willing to change sides. I'm willing to go back, and I don't care what it takes for me to get back over there. I want to be back. Even if I could be on the outside, if I could be on the outside of my father's household, even if I could just have the leftovers, it'd be so good. If I could just have a little something, I'll work for it. I'll do whatever I got to do. I'll change my thoughts. I'll change whatever. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. Old Testament, Jesus' time, beginning of New Testament. Let me ask this question. Gilligan's Island, for those of you who remember, they had more motor cars on there. They didn't have bicycles. They didn't have cars. They didn't have motorcycles. They didn't have mass transit. They didn't even have Nikes or Adidas's or whatever your fancy shoes are we wear now. They didn't have that stuff. They had sandals, and typically you would walk. Now, let me ask this other question for those of you that are here today thinking, wow, how far we've progressed. In some ways we haven't. How many of us, if you have a rebellious child, how many of us, if that child does you wrong, and I'm talking like teenage years, right? Adult years, whatever, does you wrong, you see, and takes your money and makes a scene out of you in public, right? Because everybody's talking like, wow. How many of you, when a child's coming back, would take off running to go hug and embrace that rebellious child? Pretty quiet. Well, but think about what that takes. How many of us would go running towards that child, hug them, embrace them? Now, you may say yes, okay, and I'm cool with that. That's the right answer. But how easy would that be? Not so much. The elder, and in the early service I did get in trouble with this statement. I didn't say elderly, I said elder. The elder in that time not only would not have given any estate to the younger child, they would not go running. The child would run to them. They would not run to the child. So this is out of character, that the father would run and hug and embrace the child. And this is out of character because of the way the culture was. So now Jesus has got people's attention. In the text it goes on. By the way, I want to go back before I even go forward. If I have someone coming at me and I'm looking the other way, I can't see them to come running to embrace them. See, the Father's love. The Father never stopped looking for that one opportunity for reconciliation. Never stopped looking for that chance for one to come. So the Son to come back so I can show love and reconciliation and bring him back into the household and show him that I never wanted you to leave. I never wanted our relationship broken. But it's okay. Let's start over right now. The Father had to be looking. Never stopped looking. The Son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven, against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. So what was the son expecting? He was expecting Dad to say, well, you know what? We got beef on this property. We got a lot of work to be done. We don't have pigs, but you get to work. And I'll feed you one meal a day. He was willing to do whatever to get a little. The Father does something very odd, but very awesome. Father said, quick, bring the best robe. Now, I want to focus on that. Doesn't say the old robe. Doesn't say something he used to have. It says the very best. Bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals for his feet. Remember, he had nothing. Father wants to get him restored, takes care of him. Let's have a feast and celebrate. The son was dead and alive again. He was lost and now he is found. So they began to celebrate. That would be a great story right there, wouldn't it? Who's the prodigal son? At one point, all of us. At one point, all of us have gone astray, walked astray. Now, did we go out and feed pigs? I can't answer that. But all of us have been away from God in one way or another, at one point or another. Whether a half a second or 20 years, whatever, we're still away. The story doesn't end there. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. He came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called on one of the servants to ask him what was going on. Your brother's come. Your dad's got a fattened calf, and he's back safe and sound. We're celebrating. Verse 28, the older brother became angry and refused to go in. How many of you, if you were part of something, and I'm going to change the household context here slightly. Now is where we're going to have that uh-oh moment. Yes, the way Jesus was talking about it was the teachers of the law. I'm going to contemporize this because it's too easy for us to point the finger and say, oh yeah, like that person, like this person. Are we the older brother in church? Okay. Hold on to that because we're going to fix that thought. And I hope that you're not. But here's what I want us to think about, some of us. We come into church, and instantly it becomes, instead of God's house for all of God's people, it becomes like my place. Some of us have our own special pews. Right? Talked about that earlier. Kind of joking, but does it become something that we want to forget how we came in tears and came to Christ? How we came in searching answers? Does it become something that we have such a hard time with somebody else coming in that's done something wrong that we then want to say, wow, look at that person. Man, they're really messed up. It's a household for sick people. It's also a hospital for healing. It's not a place to stay perpetually sick, but a place to find grace, hope, healing, and peace. We can become either brother at any given time. We should celebrate when people come to Christ. No matter how they come to Christ, coming to Christ is a celebration. Coming back to God is a celebration. God shows us through His Son in this text that it's about a personal relationship. See, that son had to go back, and that son had to go back and talk to the Father. This is a parable because Jesus is our way back to the Father. Jesus is the one that offers us that hope and that cleaning up. But it's that personal relationship with Christ that changes our life and many others around us. When you're right with God, others will want to know what's going on. I want a little something that you got. It's an opportunity. The older brother, but when a son of yours has squandered your property with working girls comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him? I want to throw a little thought out right now. In seminary class, last year in the Bible class, the teacher said, well, this older brother is accusing the younger brother, and there's no evidence that he was with working girls. Right? Sometimes God uses us to bring light to the Scripture in a different way. Is there a possibility that the older brother knew this? Because the older brother, even though he was following all the laws and doing everything, was in sin also? And he might have passed his younger brother doing something he shouldn't have. See, the Bible teaches us all of us have fallen short of God's glory. All of us. I raised this thought for this question. The older brother was so angry. Was he all in the right? See, when you're all in the right, you take the role of the Father, being God. We need to realize that God is love, God is peace, God is forgiveness, and God is grace. And this season of Lent, God is hope. Hope is coming into the world. March 27th is the date we celebrate Christ coming into his glory. Many people have died before. Only one was risen from death to life and cares about each and every one of us. Desires our lives to be changed and a great thing to happen. My son, the father said, "You were always with me, and everything I have is yours." But we had to celebrate and be glad, because his brother yours was dead and alive again. He was lost, and now he's found. We're going to have fun today, because we're alive. In fact, I thank God every day I get up now. 38 years old. It's crazy. I should have another 30 years where I need to worry about that, right? But I'll start doing it now. That's practice, just in case. What I want us to do today, and this nice sheet of paper you have, see how nice it is? Some of them are a little bit used, but one side's clear. As you take this piece of paper, I want you to think about, see, in a pig pen here, there's no pigs in here. And we're going to fill this thing up with manure. We're going to fill this thing up with waste. We're going to fill this thing up with things that have happened to us, things that we've done by accident to others, intentionally to others, thoughts we've had that no one knows, just us, feelings we've had, someone that maybe that has offended us, we need to ask God for forgiveness, or that we've done wrong. The feelings that come with that is what we're going to put on this piece of paper. Communion today is about grace and hope and change, but communion is also about us confessing and repenting and asking God to forgive us and change us. Our confession today for communion, we're going to take the next few minutes. We're going to write down the things that are separating us from God. These are what we would like to call pig pen moments, if you will. These are things that are literally not so smelling nice to the nose of God and to others and us. Take a moment and write down some things that are hurting you, and while you're writing, I want to share this with you. We're going to take care of these Old Testament way. We're going to give God a burnt offering off this property right after church. We're going to put them in the parking lot. We're going to go ahead and set a match on them. And if there's too many of them, we might even get the fire department out here today. But it's not between me and you. It's between you and God.